This week, a conflict radiating out from Iran has shut down the Strait of Hormuz. Aluminum prices are spiking to 4-year highs, and key smelters in the Middle East have gone dark. For American industry, this isn't a distant problem. It's an immediate supply chain crisis unfolding in real time. But this isn't a random geopolitical shock. This crisis didn't actually begin this week. It's the final predictable chapter of a story that started over a year ago with a single policy decision aimed at America's most stable and integrated partner, Canada. To understand how this was allowed to happen, we have to go back to the decision that quietly began to dismantle a secure supply chain and set this entire crisis in motion. So, when we rewind the clock just before this crisis, what did that secure supply chain actually look like? It wasn't simply a trading relationship. It was something far more deeply connected. To understand it, think less of two countries exchanging goods and more like two divisions of a single continental scale corporation. Canada, with its vast and cheap hydropower, was the smelting division, producing the raw aluminum ingot. The United States was the fabrication division, taking that pure metal and transforming it into everything from car doors in Michigan to aircraft fuselages in Washington. For decades, the border was little more than an administrative line in a shared production process. As analysts at the time correctly described it, the relationship functioned more like a single industrial system stretched across a border. And the numbers confirm this deep integration. In 2024, Canada exported over $14 billion worth of aluminum, and a staggering 94% of that value flowed directly to the United States. This wasn't a diversified portfolio of customers, it was a dedicated supply pipeline. That single stream of metal accounted for nearly half of all the aluminum America imported. It wasn't just a partner, it was the bedrock of the entire U.S. manufacturing supply chain. This entire finely tuned machine, built over decades on mutual benefit and predictability, provided a stable foundation for industries on both sides. And it is precisely that stability that makes what happened next so illogical. This vast, deeply rooted industrial ecosystem was about to be fundamentally rewired. Not by a market crash or a natural disaster, but by a policy decision, a few lines of text that would ignore the economic geography of a continent, and in doing so, trigger the very crisis we see today. That catalyst was a single policy decision enacted in 2025. The U.S. government imposed heavy tariffs on aluminum imports, a policy that explicitly included Canada. Now, these were not minor adjustments. The policy landed in March of 2025 with a 25% tariff on all aluminum imports. By June, for Canada, that rate had doubled to a crippling 50%. A 50% tariff might sound like a number on a policy document, but in the physical reality of a supply chain, it behaves like a massive pressure valve being slammed shut on a pipeline that had been flowing freely for decades. The stated intention, of course, was purely protectionist. The official logic was to shield the domestic U.S. aluminum industry from all foreign competition to, in theory, stimulate a great revival of American production. But when you slam a valve shut on a system under that much pressure, the flow doesn't just stop. It violently seeks a new path. And that is precisely what happened. Faced with a newly hostile American market, Canada didn't just wait. It began to fundamentally rewire its connections to the globe, a strategic pivot whose consequences Washington never saw coming. So, what does this rewiring of global trade actually look like in practice? When Washington shut the door, Canadian aluminum producers were faced with a simple, cold calculation. The American market, once their primary partner, had become both unprofitable and dangerously unpredictable. For any rational business, the response was unavoidable. They had to pivot and they had to do it fast. The new destination was Europe. This wasn't a random choice. It was driven by a crucial factor that the American tariff policy completely ignored: the carbon content of the metal. European buyers were increasingly willing to pay a premium for low-carbon aluminum, and Canada's industry, powered almost entirely by clean hydroelectricity, was perfectly positioned to supply it. The market sent a clear signal, and Canadian industry responded. This shift wasn't a slow drift. It was a sudden, tectonic rerouting of a continental supply chain. The data tells a stark story. In Quebec, Canada's aluminum heartland, the share of exports destined for the United States dropped from 95% in the first quarter of 2015 to just 78% in the second. In just 3 months, the flow was fundamentally altered. And where did that volume go? In that exact same quarter, the share of Quebec's aluminum exports going to Europe surged from a rounding error of 0.2% to a substantial 18%. To see what this looks like on the ground, consider the Alouette smelter, the largest in North America. For this single facility, shipments to Europe went from just 4% of its output in the first quarter to a staggering 57% in the second. This wasn't a protest gesture. It was a structural rewiring of a business model cemented by new long-term contracts with European partners. The old pipes were being ripped out and new ones were being permanently welded in place across the Atlantic. But this pivot, this defensive maneuver born from necessity, would have an unforeseen consequence. What began as a desperate search for a new customer accidentally became a strategic masterstroke, positioning Canada to gain a powerful and perhaps even unfair advantage in the new landscape of global trade. That advantage has a name: the European Union's Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, or CBAM. This is the central irony of the entire story. The hostile U.S. tariff, designed to punish Canadian industry, had a powerful and counterintuitive consequence. It inadvertently forced Canada into a far stronger, more strategic long-term position. So what is CBAM? At its core, it's a landmark climate policy from the EU that fundamentally rewires the rules of trade. It taxes imports based on the carbon emissions generated during their production. The simplest way to think of it is as a VIP lane at the European border for clean products. While high-polluting aluminum from other nations gets stuck in a metaphorical traffic jam, forced to pay a hefty carbon tax for every ton, Canada's clean aluminum cruises right through to a market that is not only welcoming, but willing to pay more for it. This is where Canada's geography becomes its destiny, because the vast majority of our aluminum is smelted using clean, abundant hydropower. It has one of the lowest carbon footprints in the world. Under the rules of CBAM, this environmental fact becomes a massive competitive advantage. It's no longer just a talking point for a brochure. It's a structural, financial edge. Analysis by groups like Anthesis shows that while high-carbon competitors face escalating penalties, Canadian low-carbon aluminum faces minimal costs, positioning it to command potential price premiums of $150 to $200 per ton. When you trace the ripple effects, a clear industrial logic emerges. The 2025 U.S. tariff acted as a forceful push, ejecting Canadian industry from a volatile and newly unreliable market. At the exact same time, the EU's CBAM acted as a powerful pull, drawing that same industry into a stable, profitable, and structurally aligned new orbit. Together, these two forces didn't just cause a temporary shift, they triggered a permanent, advantageous realignment for Canadian industry. This outcome feels like an accidental strategic victory, but the truly critical question isn't just, how did Canada secure this advantage? It's, why did Washington's policy fail so completely and predictably? The answer is that the policy's design ignored the unbreakable physics of supply chains. To understand why this tariff was doomed from the moment it was conceived, we have to dissect the foundational flaw in its logic, a flaw rooted not in politics, but in the cold, hard math of energy and geography. That foundational flaw wasn't a complex political miscalculation. It was a failure to respect a simple, brutal law of industrial physics. Aluminum smelting is essentially a process of converting pure electricity into solid metal. It is one of the most energy-intensive manufacturing processes on Earth. To produce a single metric ton of aluminum requires about 15,000 kilowatt hours of electricity, enough energy to power an average Canadian home for well over a year. Because of this, the single largest variable cost in any smelter's budget is the price of power, and this is where the policy's logic collided with reality. In Canada, smelters, particularly in Quebec and British Columbia, are plugged into vast networks of legacy hydroelectric dams, giving them access to power for as low as $25 to $40 per megawatt hour. In contrast, the average industrial electricity price in the United States hovers between $60 and $80. A tariff can apply a tax at the border, but it cannot repeal the laws of economics. You cannot legislate a competitive advantage that geography and physics have already permanently given to someone else. The proof is in the results. The stated goal was to reopen American smelters. The actual result? The number of operating smelters in the U.S. continued to decline, falling to a historic low of just 4 by 2025, down from over 20 in their heyday. The extra cost that American manufacturers had to pay for aluminum, known as the Midwest Premium, didn't fall. It surged to record highs, signaling desperation in the market, not a revival of domestic abundance. With its own production failing to restart and its most reliable, cost-effective supplier now rerouting its supply chains toward Europe, Washington was forced to make a high-risk decision. To fill the growing gap, it had to turn away from the predictable, stable industrial ecosystem of its northern neighbor and look to sources dependent on the most volatile and strategically contested shipping lane on the planet. Having pushed away its most reliable partner and failed to build its own capacity, Washington was left with few choices. This wasn't a strategic pivot. It was a desperate necessity to plug a massive supply gap. The result was a fundamental rewiring of America's industrial base, forcing it to turn dramatically toward aluminum from the Middle East, specifically the UAE and Bahrain. The data shows the scale of this shift. By 2025, imports from these distant suppliers had surged to account for 23% of all U.S. unwrought aluminum imports, a steep climb from 16% just the year before. To understand the risk this created, picture this. It's like firing your skilled, reliable contractor who lives next door, and instead hiring one from a different continent who has to cross a known conflict zone to get to your house every day. The risk is self-evident and self-inflicted. This decision swapped a stable, land-based North American supply chain for a fragile, long-distance one, wholly dependent on shipping through the world's most volatile geopolitical choke point, the Strait of Hormuz. For years, that was just strategic vulnerability on a map, a theoretical risk policymakers chose to accept, a fragile but functioning system. That is, until this week. With the flare-up in the strait, that abstract risk became an immediate physical reality. The countdown on America's industrial security has now officially begun. And so the countdown begins, not in a quiet policy meeting, but with the harsh, undeniable reality of satellite photos showing smoke rising from the Emirates Global Aluminium Facility in the UAE and the Alba smelter in Bahrain. The conflict in the Strait of Hormuz is no longer a risk analysis on a slide deck. It's a physical event that has just taken over 3 million tons of annual production offline. The theoretical vulnerability we've been tracing has just become a physical fact. The first phone calls from Washington naturally would go north to Canada. But for the first time in decades, that call finds a dead end. It's not a political refusal, it's a structural reality. Those new long-term contracts we signed with European automakers and manufacturers, built on the foundation of our low-carbon energy grid, they have locked in our supply. The river of aluminum that once flowed south has been permanently rerouted east across the Atlantic. The system was rewired. The second call then goes domestic to the shuttered smelters in places like Kentucky and Missouri. but you can't restart a smelter like you flip a light switch. These are colossal industrial machines. To bring one back from a cold stop is a 6 to 12 month process of reheating, restaffing, and recertification. It's a solution on a calendar year timeline for a problem that is measured in weeks. So the third and final option is a desperate search for emergency supply from somewhere else in the world, South Asia perhaps. Even if a willing seller can be found and a deal struck in hours, the physical logistics are unchangeable. A cargo ship takes 60 days to cross the ocean, navigate customs, and unload its metal at a U.S. port. 60 days. Okay, pause. We've just laid out the board. Canadian supply is locked in Europe. Domestic smelters are cold. Emergency ships are 60 days away. You can see the strategic trap, but this is the precise detail where a supply chain problem ignites into a national security emergency. It's not the lack of options that is the fatal variable, it's the timeline. And what I'm about to show you is the mathematical countdown that America's defense and auto industries are now staring down. The critical industries that depend on this metal, automotive plants in Michigan, aerospace contractors in California, construction, packaging, and even the production lines for critical defense hardware. They don't have 6 months of inventory. They don't even have 60 days. On average, they have 30 days of aluminum left. 30 days until production lines start to grind to a halt. When a country depends on imports for nearly half of its aluminum, as one analyst put it, any interruption does not create a slow squeeze. It creates a countdown. And here is the quiet, devastating irony of it all. A policy created to enhance industrial security has directly led to its greatest vulnerability in decades. It systematically dismantled a secure, predictable, land-based supply network. In its place, it constructed a fragile, long-distance system that breaks not on a spreadsheet, but on a calendar. The math simply doesn't work. This isn't a problem anymore. It's a countdown to zero. The crisis is now a reality. The numbers are what they are. So the question is no longer if the system breaks, but what happens the day after it does? What does this new industrial map, redrawn by a single policy failure, actually mean for the next decade of North American security and manufacturing? So, what does this new industrial map, redrawn by a single policy failure, actually mean for the next decade? It means the economic geography of North America has been permanently rewired. And for Canada, the consequences are profound. Let's briefly trace the flow of this disruption one last time. A U.S. tariff, blind to the physics of energy costs, did not revive its domestic industry. Instead, it pushed its most reliable partner, Canada, to secure its future with long-term contracts in Europe. This forced the United States into a desperate reliance on a geopolitically fragile supply line from the Middle East, a line that has now been severed, triggering the very crisis we've just witnessed. The ultimate outcome of this entire episode is a new reality. Canada's economic sovereignty has been structurally enhanced by being forced to diversify away from an over-reliance on a single and frankly volatile customer. Our industrial base is now more resilient. It's more deeply embedded in stable, value-aligned transatlantic alliances. A policy designed to discipline Canada has unintentionally granted it a greater degree of strategic freedom. This entire saga is a stark lesson in how abstract policy decisions create very real physical consequences on the ground. It proves that supply chains are not just lines on a map. They are commitments, relationships, and conduits of national power. And this leaves us with one final critical question about our future. This trade conflict has permanently rewired North America's industrial map. In the comments, I want to know your take. Is this a story of long-term strategic gain for Canada, or are the risks of a fractured relationship with the U.S. still too high? Let me know your thoughts. If you found this framework useful for making sense of the complex forces shaping our country, please consider sharing this video. And to ensure you don't miss future analyses that connect global policy to Canada's economic reality, make sure you subscribe. Thank you for watching.